Hey guys, it's Crazy Dog, and today I'm here to talk about a company that I've been looking at for a while. It's ticker symbol MX, Magnachip. They are an OLED semiconductor company. This is a company that I like a lot, and it's a company that I believe can have 100% gains today while having a potential 1000% gain by 2023. Now, I made this video because I've written a DD on this, but I was reading through it and I realized there's a lot of confusing elements in it. So this is a way kind of where I can clarify things, kind of create a consolidated video about that. Now, before I talk about it, I just want to talk a little bit about philosophy. I believe that preparation plus opportunity leads to success. And in this situation, you're going to see that Magnachip has really prepared itself for this new opportunity that's coming. So what is Magnachip? Well, Magnachip is a semiconductor company that makes display drive integrated circuits, otherwise known as DDIC. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, what the heck is DDIC? Well, let me use my body as an example. My brain tells my body what to do. My brain uses my spinal cord to communicate to my body to move, to run around, or do whatever. But the important thing is, if my spinal cord breaks, effectively, my body becomes almost useless. And so, using this analogy, the brain is the processor inside most of these phones or whatever device we're talking about. The body is the display. The DDIC, of course, is the all-important spinal cord. Going back to Magnachip a little bit, they're the #1 global DDIC manufacturer in the world, and they provide solutions for phones, TVs, automobile screens. You think about the digital odometers on some of these fancy cars, the big middle dashboards, in Teslas. So for both for regular and for EVs, they supply to companies like Samsung or LG. They actually represent about 66% of their revenue, and Samsung or LG as a whole control about 95% of the OLED display market. And so let's get into the history of MX a little bit. MX is a 20+ year company that was the first in the market to start developing OLED DDIC in 2003. Because they were the first in the market, they have had a lot of time to develop and accumulate quality IP and patents, but also processes for OLED DDICs. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, what is OLED? Well, OLED is the next generation of screen. To give an example, TVs, we went from those big tubes into LCDs into LEDs, and now phones are going from LCDs into OLEDs. Just to give a little bit of a bigger picture, out of all the smartphone displays sold, 75% of the industry is using TFT LCD, while 25% of the industry is using OLED. What kind of phones are using the OLED? Think about the higher flagship phones like the iPhone 11 Pro Max, the Samsung Galaxy, etc. and etc. So going back to MX's situation, MX was right on about OLED. The issue was they were so early to the game. I mean, think about it. They were in 2003. In 2003, George Bush was still president. Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected as California's next governor, and there was no such thing as smartphone. So to keep with the times, MX kept producing other products such as DDICs for LCDs, but MX kept developing their baby because they knew that the secret sauce was in the OLED. So ultimately, what has changed? Well, 5G. As you all know, 5G is going to become the norm within the next 2 to 3 years. If you've been living under a rock, 5G is the next generation in cellular connectivity. We went from 3G, GSM to CDMAs to 4G LTEs, and now with 5G, we're going to see connectivity speeds 100 times faster than we've ever seen before. This is going to open up all sorts of opportunities for the world. The issue is when phone manufacturers introduce their new latest and greatest phones, you can't just give a phone with 5G lightning speeds but not upgrade everything else. So manufacturers upgrade other parts of the phone to stay competitive and justify their price point. And so what are the things manufacturers add? Well, they need to add things like better and slimmer designs, faster processors, maybe new colors, but most obviously better quality screens. Now, screens have become more and more important in the industry, especially with the rise of streaming and mobile gaming. In fact, there was a report that estimated that in 2020, the mobile gaming revenue was going to hit about $76.7 billion. This is more than the film and the music industry combined together. And so going back to it, this is important because while you're going to be watching YouTube or playing Fortnite on your 5G lightning speeds, it's not going to matter much if you're going to be looking at a potato video screen. And so now with the rise of 5G, we have to look back and think, where is MX positioned in all? And the simple way to say it is, MX has been waiting 18 years for this day to come. MX on the technology side is ready. They recently launched their new DDIC product lines, which are 28 nanometer OLED DDICs. It's smaller than the traditional 40 nanometer DDICs that we saw in the past, and ultimately that's going to mean a smaller and thinner phone. The DDICs are also going to feature 120 Hz high frame rate capabilities, which is going to be a smoother picture, especially for gaming. We're going to see compatibility with various display types, including rigid and flexible, foldable, and VR. The new DDICs are also going to feature a reduction in power voltage from 1.1 volts to 1.0, reducing power consumption by more than 20% and extending battery lives. The DDICs are also going to feature a reduction in EMIs, electromagnetic interference, by about 20%. And finally, you're going to have support for something called LTPO, low temperature polycrystalline oxide displays, which ultimately means you're going to have a more power efficient backplane and extending battery life. So again, on the technology side, MX is ready. In addition, on the manufacturing side, MX is also ready. All of MX's OLED DDICs are going to be made primarily in 300mm factories, otherwise known as fabs, which is going to result in greater profit margins. Chips or semiconductors are made in fabs, usually on 200 or 300mm silicon wafers. The 200mm wafer was introduced in 1992. And to give a visual equivalent, let's say my job was to boil 1 million eggs. The 200mm wafer is like trying to boil 1 million eggs in a medium-sized saucepan. In addition, the saucepan is so old that it's possible that when I use new tech eggs, they might get cracked. So ultimately, that's going to result in a lower yield and also lower margins. Now, the 300mm wafers are the new standard in making chips. To use the same example, this is the equivalent of making 1 million eggs in a shiny large pot, which also has a lower chance of the new high-tech eggs getting cracked. Ultimately, this is going to result in higher yield and higher margins. The Elec, which is a Korean tech blog, talked about how Samsung Display was going to become the exclusive supplier for their OLED panels. Now, some of the things that the displays are rumored to have are OLED screens, 120 Hz high frame rates, and an LPTO display. Now, I wonder if Samsung has a relationship with the DDIC company that has the chips that can provide and support all of that. Now again, if we go back to the philosophy that we talked about in the beginning, I really believe that success happens when preparation meets opportunity. And in this situation, MX is prepared. They've been waiting 18 years for this moment to happen. And with the advent of 5G, it's going to catalyze the whole mobile industry, which is going to lead to a large demand in OLED screens. I think the Apple situation is a good example of how MX has prepared themselves. In fact, in the past, analysts have talked about how MX was always a good fit for Apple to use, and regardless of whether they get that contract from Samsung or not, they're in a good position moving forward. And now finally, let's get back to the most important thing: money. How is MX valued? As of February 19th, MX was ranging between $19 and $20, which gives them about a $700 million valuation. MX's 2020 revenue was $465.5 million. This is not including the sale of one of their older 200mm fabs. Profit was about $128 million. This represents a gross profit margin of about 25 to 27%. In addition, they have about $279 million just sitting in the bank, partially due to the sale of the 200mm fab. So again, this is a $700 million company with about $279 million in cash inside their bank. If we take out the sale of 200mm fab, the 2020 MX PE ratio should be around 12 to 15. Let's take the median, about 13.5. Now, just to remind us all, PE ratio is price over over earnings. It's one of the metrics to evaluate a company, but also it's a good way to see how the industry views the growth within this company. To give an example, Tesla's P/E ratio was about 1,220, which obviously means people think that this company is going somewhere very, very far in the future. So how does MX's P/E ratio compare to some of its comparable companies? Well, let's look at Synaptics for an example. They're valued at about $4.72 billion, and their P/E ratio is about 33.34. So in other words, the market thinks Magnachip is going to have about half the growth rate of the average company inside the semiconductor industry. But we obviously know this is not true. But let's use that as a standard. If we take the industry standard PE ratio of 23 times earnings, the valuation of Magnachip should be at minimum about $1 to $1.4 billion, which should put them at a stock price of about $35 to $38. In other words, even if we are going to say that Magnachip is going to have average growth at best, they should be valued double where they are today. So what about if we look at the future? Well, in January of this year, MX gave an investor presentation where they projected by 2023, the global OLED DDIC market for just phones would be about $2.3 billion. If MX just maintains their current market, this means that their 2023 revenue should be around $800 million. Their gross margin would rise to about 30% thanks to their 300mm fabs. And that means that the profit should be about $241 million. Now, if we take the same P/E ratio for the industry standard at about 23, the market cap or the evaluation of this company should be at about $6.8 billion. That would result in a stock price of about $201 or about 1,018.60% gains. So long story short, I really like this stock. I really like Magnachip. I was so surprised that it was brought to my attention, and they have a bright future ahead of them. They've been preparing for a long time, maybe a little bit too long, but with the advent of these new opportunities like 5G, I really believe that this company is going to be able to reach new heights. Thanks again, guys, for watching. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment, like, and subscribe if you guys want to see more videos, and hope to talk to you guys again soon.